Hello everyone, welcome to today's lecture, and today we are going to talk about socialization, culture and education. So we are going to be moving outside the room and see how education is not just about passing exams, not just about textbooks and doing continuous assessment tests. It's also about character formation. It's also about relating with one another, through activities in the school. We are going to be looking at how the family as a social institution and how the peer groups, how mass media affect your education, how they shape you to be a responsible or even irresponsible grown-up. So let's dive right into it. So what is socialization? Socialization is a lifelong process of learning how to live in society. It's how we pick up norms, values, roles, and behaviors. Education plays a big role here. It's a formal tool that helps us, to adapt to different social settings and respond to change. Think about a child in Bungoma learning to greet elders respectfully. That's not just good manners, it's actually cultural socialization. They are learning what is expected in their community. Socialization helps individuals learn societal norms and values, roles that you are expected to play as a teenager, as a grown up, as a married person, as a responsible citizen. Socialization helps us to learn these roles that are expected of us. Education also serves as a tool for formal socialization. You see, socialization can happen accidentally, but it can also be planned. In schools, when you see teachers putting students in groups for discussion, they are formalizing that socialization. They are teaching you important ideals like cooperation, collaboration. When students say that education ni harambe, it's harambe for sure, where you are supposed to collaborate. That is socialization. Now, when you socialize, you also become adaptive to change. In a rapidly changing society, socialization helps you to adapt to change. Socialization does four major things. One, it teaches us our roles, like being a student. What does it entail to be a student? What is expected of you to be a student? Being a sibling, what does a sibling do? Being a responsible citizen, what do you do? What is your civic duty as a citizen? Socialization also passes down traditions, passes down beliefs and practices from one generation to the next. You learn a lot about your own culture when you spend time with older members of your community. That goes without saying. You are with your grandmother, you learn something. You are with your grandfather, you learn something. So, in essence, what they're doing is passing down those cultural practices, those norms, those ideals to the next generation. And it's expected of you that you'll do the same to the generations that are coming after you. Socialization also regulates behavior. Through rules. Every culture has rules, has regulation. Things like discipline and social norms that, those play regulatory roles. They regulate behavior. You are expected to behave in a certain way in certain settings. It also encourages creativity and innovation within cultural boundaries. Like you are socializing, you are expected to be creative in the way you conduct your activities. Now, we look at a few agents of socialization and we begin with family. Why begin with family? Before schooling, before anything else, before mass media, before peer pressure, family is where it all begins. Our first encounter with language, for example, is at home. We don't learn language at school. We begin learning language at home. So family also pass on values, behaviors, and these behaviors that influence how we relate with others. You've heard people say, let them behave the way they behave. They were not raised by my mother. That tells you something, that you are expected to have certain behavior that were influenced by your parents, by your caregiver. Now, families influence how we see ourselves, our aspirations, how we relate with others. A parent who encourages storytelling might be nurturing future journalists or civic educators. In many societies the world over, family values like respect for elders and communal responsibility often guide children's educational paths. That's why understanding family dynamics is key to understanding students' behavior. We think about where you come from when we see you behaving the way you behave. Maybe you come from a broken family and your behavior is unbecoming. So we will just know from the get-go that they behave the way they behave because of where they come from. You are a reflection of where you come from and the values and the ideals that have been instilled in you by your parents or caregivers. How about schools? Schools are powerful socializing spaces. In a more formal way, schools teach academic subjects, moral values, and social skills. Students learn discipline, they learn cooperation, they learn civil responsibility, basically at school. But more informally, we have peer interactions that shape identity and behavior. All schools I know of have clubs. They are engaged in some sporting activity or the other. They engage in group work, whether in class or while doing projects. What does this do? This fosters leadership and teamwork. The world favors people who work together because together we succeed a lot more than if you did it alone. It is said if you want to go far, you go with others. If you want to go fast, you go alone. Most of us want to go far, so embrace teamwork. What about peer groups? When you hear about peer groups, sometimes it has negative connotations. While you are in lower levels of education, you heard about peer pressure. When it's now pressure, it becomes negative. But there's nothing wrong with peer groups. Peers are just people who are, have same interest, probably the same age as you, and they shape who you are. Peer groups influence how people, and especially adolescents, think, and how they dress, and how they speak, and how they behave. They share self-image and values. Sometimes peer pressure pushes students to excel, like people pushing you to do well in math. That is pressure. So peer pressure can even have a positive effect. But there are times when peer pressure can hold you back, when you are being pushed to indulge in antisocial behaviors, in unacceptable behavior. A student who joins a drama club might gain confidence and creativity, but also feel pressure to perform or fit in. In Kenyan schools, peer groups influence everything, and by everything I mean everything, from fashion to attitude, attitude towards people, attitude towards education, social issues. You're probably dressed the way you dress because somebody else is dressed like that. And that is peer pressure. So peers can influence the way you go through life. You can either succeed because of peers or can be a miserable failure because of peers. What about mass media? Media is everywhere. And media is shaping minds. Positively, it exposes the youth to global issues, to diverse cultures, and to educational content. But it also has its negative effects, because negatively it can promote harmful stereotypes or unrealistic expectations or consumerism. You have iPhone 10, it's working perfectly well, but because you have heard that your friend has iPhone 13, you want to buy iPhone 13. So we live in this small space of consumerism where we always just want more and more. unrealistic expectations by what you see in the media. You have seen this favorite artist driving a G-Wagon, and so you're telling yourself, immediately you finish your fourth year, you're going to work and buy a G-Wagon. No one tells you that people who have bought G-Wagons are usually people who have a lot of money. So that is negative influence. Did you know Kenyan youths consume media for averagely 7.5 hours a day? That's a lot of time. You're almost like spending half your life on social media. 95% have access to media platform. That's huge. Not too long ago, access to media was a big thing, it was a big problem, but now 95% have access to media platform. What does this tell you? That if not carefully handled, media can be a place or a space where people just really get lost. One student might watch news and documentaries and become a news anchor later in life. You know, you admire somebody on TV. You want to be like Jeff Koinange. You want to be like Larry Madowo. You are watching their programs. And because you're watching so much of that, you want to be like them. That's a positive influence. But another might watch toxic content and develop a distorted self-image. So media matters. That's what I'm saying. Media matters. And we began by stating that media shapes minds. And indeed, media shapes minds. Some of the images you hold in your head, some of the failures people experience is something they have watched on TV or on social media. Religion plays a big role in shaping moral values and social norms because it promotes positive behavior through teachings, through rituals. But the downside of it is that it can also encourage conformity or discourage questioning. You are told in many religious teachings that you can't question anything. You believe without seeing. You believe blindly. If you carry that into real life, then you get lost. Church youth groups, for example, teach compassion and service, and that's a good thing. You have youth meetings, youth forums, youth camps, and they teach compassion, how to feel the pain of others. But they might also resist alternative viewpoints. In Kenya, as you may know, religious institutions often partner with schools for mentorship, for counseling, and for moral education. You see schools being named after churches or being sponsored by churches. You probably went to a school that's called A4AM, that's a Quaker school. You went to a school called RC, that's a Roman Catholic school. You went to schools called PCEA, that's a church school. That partnership shapes character because oftentimes the clergy would come to schools and talk to students and impart moral values. How about the wider community as a socializing agent? Socialization doesn't just stop at the school gate. Communities shape identity. Communities shape status. Communities shape behavior. Because they teach shared values and social norms through everyday interactions. Local markets, youth centers, community events, all teach negotiations, all teach cooperation, all teach civic responsibility. Through storytelling, for example, elders mentor the youth and instill moral values. That shows us that education is not confined in the four walls of the classroom. You can learn outside the classroom by just socializing with the wider community. Now, culture and education are deeply connected. They are intertwined. Because culture determines what's taught, how it's taught, and how it's received. Curriculum design, teaching methods, and student perceptions are all shaped by cultural context. In Kenya, integrating local proverbs and storytelling into lessons makes learning more relatable and grounded. it's not just about the content, it's also about connection. And this relates to what you've already been taught, that you teach from known to unknown in an increasing level of complexity. So if you give a story that then instill moral values into the learners, something they can relate to, you are actually teaching from known to unknown. They can connect better with that. Let's talk about cultural capital. It refers to non-financial assets like the language, the habits, exposure to knowledge, that influence academic success. This influences academic success. Take, for instance, middle class families. They often provide more cultural capital in the form of books, in the form of structured routines, like it's break time, it's breakfast time, it's playing time, swimming time, it's watching time. That's structured routine. Academic language. I should remind you that most of these middle class families use English as a language of communication at home. And it goes without saying that they are poised to succeed because language ceases to be a barrier on the academic journey, because the language at home is the language at school. Now think also of a child raised in a home where current events are discussed daily. This is what the government has done, this is what America has done. They may perform better in civic education, not because they are smarter, but because they have more exposure. Now, socialization affects how students perform. Let's not make a mistake about that. Roles are learned early, like being curious. What you call intellectual curiosity is learned a lot early in life. Confidence depends on how you were raised by your parents and who your siblings were and how they treated you. That can either build or erode confidence from you. Values like being obedient shape academic identity. Family, peers, and media all play a part in shaping character. Teacher-student interaction are also influenced by cultural norms. In some cultures, students and teachers don't have a very close relationship. In some, that line is very tenuous, it's actually blurred. You wouldn't know who is a teacher and who is not. A student raised to question and debate may thrive in interactive classrooms. One taught to remain silent may struggle to participate. They become timid. So school reflects societal values, and those values can empower or they can marginalize. So what are some of the challenges in socializing through education? We learn that it's not all smooth sailing. Education can reinforce inequality. How? For example, through biased curricula, through resource gaps. Some schools are well resourced, others are not. Others are grappling with even the basic of needs. Now, social biases are based on ethnicity, sometimes based on gender, sometimes based on disability, sometimes based on religion. And these biases limit opportunity. If girls are discouraged from pursuing STEM subjects, for example, due to cultural norms, then education becomes a gatekeeper, not a liberator. For you as a teacher or a teacher trainee, you must challenge these barriers so that girls are given the same opportunities as boys. Somebody said if education is not important for girls, it's superfluous for boys. I think that is Margaret Ogola. And I think Nyerere is the one who said, not Nyerere, Achimota, James Agri Achimota says, if you want to educate a nation, you educate the girl. Inclusive education means embracing diversity. Schools should reflect cultural backgrounds of their students. So policies must promote equity and respect for differences. These differences are what make learning more enjoyable. You can see students who have studied in culturally diverse classrooms, being tolerant to other people's cultures, and that's something that can be celebrated. You are building a global citizen who is respectful of other people's culture. Now let's wrap up. We've seen how education is a powerful agent of socialization because it shapes roles, values, and behavior. Cultural backgrounds, on the other hand, affect how students access or engage with and succeed in school. And if we want inclusive education, we must address inequality and embrace diversity. In a multicultural society like Kenya, we have no choice but to embrace diversity. So as educators, we're not just teaching content, we are expected to shape society. Every lesson, every interaction, every policy decision will contribute to a kind of world our students will inherit and will help build. So be cautious as teachers so that you are not an agent of inequality, an agent of gender bias. Instead, you are an agent of diversity, cultural diversity for that matter. Well, you will find more comprehensive notes on the LMS, and if there are any issues you need us to discuss, we have discussion forums on the LMS. You can pose your questions there where I'll respond to them, give feedback as we move on. Also expect that at the end of every section, we are going to have quizzes that will then help you remember what you've learned and help you revise. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.